Welcome into the checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
I'm Nicholas Raba.
And I'm Nicholas Tacek.
Each week, the Nicholases and I. Is it Nicholases or Nikolai? We'll figure that out later. What we do each week is we get together and talk over the ways that you and yours can stay safe as you traverse the digital landscape, also known as living in the modern world. Now, Nicholas and Nicholas are security experts. I'm not, but I know them, so I get to talk too. Over the past few weeks, we have secured old Apple devices and new Apple devices with 3 episodes so far devoted to securing the Mac. But what is Apple itself doing to secure the Mac? On today's episode, we're hitting the Sierra. That would be macOS Sierra, the latest version of Apple's desktop operating system. It brings with it not only a new way to name the operating systems, but a bunch of new features too. Siri is on the Mac for the first time. You can copy and paste between macOS and iOS, which is kind of stunning. And then, of course, there are, new or improved security features as well. Now, people who keep up with Apple may have already played and poked around with some of the new features. Today, we're going to discuss the features, specifically the security features of macOS Sierra, some of which are sort of behind the scenes, but they're things that you should still know about. So items on the checklist today: the auto unlock feature, Gatekeeper, security patches, HTML5, and the new file system in macOS Sierra. And we start unlocking all of those mysteries with auto unlock. Talk to me about this feature, guys.
Well, before I sat down with the show here, I actually wanted to go ahead and test out this feature with my Apple Watch and my MacBook Air, and then I found out this only works on laptops or desktops that are newer than 2013. So my trusty old MacBook Air confused me for a bit before I realized that was the problem. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to actually test this myself, but we can still talk about it a bit. So basically, one of the very first security features, or kind of a security option, I guess, for Sierra is the auto unlock feature. If you have an Apple Watch, you can basically set up this nice magical system so it will automatically unlock your Mac and log you in when you're in range of the computer with your watch on your wrist, of course. So instead of having to sit there and type your password every time, in past shows we've kind of recommended, don't set up auto login, don't have your screensaver password on. This will save you from having to actually type that password. Then when you walk away from your Mac, when you're done using it, it will automatically lock itself again. So it's a pretty cool feature, kind of magical. It seems nice and futuristic and all that fun stuff. This is a feature that the tech companies have been trying to do for years, and Apple's really kind of gotten it right. I know there was a third-party app a few years back that kind of did something similar with Bluetooth and getting close to your computer with your phone. So this kind of is a step further in using the watch to unlock it. And it's a pretty decent promotional strategy for anybody who hasn't yet gotten an Apple Watch and wants to have a bit easier time when it comes to security.
Can I ask a question? And maybe you're going to hit this. I apologize. The cool thing about Apple Watch, one of the cool things about Apple Watch, not that I keep a lot of my personal information on Apple Watch, but pretty much the second you take it off, it's locked. And so if somebody else were to then put on my Apple Watch, if they don't have my passcode, they're not able to get into whatever information. I assume that means that they wouldn't be able to unlock the Mac as well. I mean, obviously, somewhere in there, it's shaking hands and saying, okay, are you actually on right now to the Apple Watch, as opposed to just, oh, well, there's an Apple Watch nearby, or there's that Apple Watch nearby. I'm going to go ahead and open up. I'm not absolutely positive on this, but it's most likely tied into the same mechanism, like you just said, when you take it off your wrist and it auto locks. It would only work to unlock your Mac if it's on your wrist or somebody's wrist and you've entered your passcode onto it. So if somebody would take your Apple Watch, they'd need to have your passcode in order to unlock your computer. And we'll cover that actually, because this whole auto unlock thing does raise a few questions about security. The goal is always to increase your security. You never want to do anything that decreases your security. Right.
So at the core, when you're enabling this auto unlock, you have to have two-factor authentication set up for your Mac. It basically is The extra step that allows you to log into your account. Usually it's for iCloud or your phone, but in this case, it's setting it up for your watch. And what happens if you misplace your watch? What happens if you lose it? That is technically a key to your computer, all your files, all that stuff, and the only thing that's stopping it is the passcode. But in that situation, say you would lose your Apple Watch, you can still log into your iCloud account on the web. You don't even have to have access to your watch itself, and you can remove it from the trusted devices or disable the two-factor authentication, so your watch can't unlock it. If you've lost your watch and you're still sitting in front of your computer, you can just turn off the setting for auto login on your computer, and the watch won't be able to unlock it. So until you find your watch, your files and data are safe. You've just turned off that feature, basically. The other question that has been brought up is the range. How far away do you have to be from your computer before the Apple Watch will unlock it or lock it after you leave? Ideally, the computer would stay locked until you're sitting right in front of it. And so far, the reports from users, then this is the thing I kind of wanted to test and wasn't able to, is that you have to be about a meter away from your computer before it will unlock. And once you get outside of that range, about a meter away again, it will lock. But if you're going to enable this feature, we'd recommend testing that range yourself just to make sure that it's, you can't go too far away from your computer before it locks, that kind of stuff. So bottom line, it's a pretty cool feature. It allows you to have a secure computer, but make that whole security process a little bit easier because you're not having to enter your password to unlock your computer. So it's saving you some time. Really convenient, and just keeping in mind that if you would lose or misplace your Apple Watch, that you'd have to basically disable the feature until you find your watch. Just an extra bit of responsibility that comes with that. But overall, it's a pretty cool new security feature in Sierra.
So now we've gotten ourselves into our Mac with the auto unlock feature. Let's talk about putting things on the Mac. There's a feature that Apple introduced, I want to say a few years back now, called Gatekeeper, which is, well, I've had questions about Gatekeeper in the past, but let me just throw those questions to you. Talk to us about Gatekeeper and what the security benefits are.
So yeah, there's been a major upgrade with Gatekeeper in Sierra. Gatekeeper's main job is to review the applications and ensure they've been signed and not tampered with. Gatekeeper's been around since Mountain Lion. It's pretty much the last protection against potentially malicious applications. So if you've ever gotten one of those messages, are you sure you want to open this application? That's a Gatekeeper feature.
Yeah, its name is very applicable. It really stands at the gate. It's sort of like the last thing before you let an application onto the playground that is your Mac. Gatekeeper stands there and says, are you sure?
And a lot of people don't even realize that this is going on their computers. So there's two main features with Gatekeeper in Sierra that are new. One's visible and one's more on the back end. The first thing, when you go to your security and privacy settings, the two options you're going to see there are allow apps that are downloaded from the Mac App Store and allow apps from the Mac App Store and identified developers. There used to be a third option in there. The third option was allow anything.
Right.
But they've changed that. They've made it less visible for the user. So sticking with the identified developers and the Mac App Store is the main focus that they want people to pay attention to there.
Now, is there still, forgive me for interrupting, is there still the option of, I think we referred to it on this show as the Wild West option. I mean, just, letting anything run on there. I mean, for people who, for whatever reason, need to download something that's not, part of the trusted system that Apple has set up, is there still a way to do that? Or are we so locked down now? I mean, which, with an eye on security, I understand why, but are we so locked down at this point that it has to be one of those two?
So you could still use the apps from the unidentified developers if you want to. Mm-hmm. To do that, you just have to right-click the app and click Open.
Okay.
But you can't do it universally anymore.
Okay.
You have to open them manually like that.
Interesting. sorry to pull us aside on that. I was just wondering about, how, I don't want to say restrictive. Let's say how protective the security had become.
Well, with Gatekeeper, they're really trying to avoid some of the malicious software out there, and they've done things on the back end side of things that makes it more secure. I mean, stopping people from just running any application, getting confused with a fake updater for whatever software that pops up on their screen. I think that's one of the main concerns there. But if you do decide to go ahead and deal with the unsigned app, Gatekeeper now chooses a random location on the drive to install it in. So it won't actually be stored in the applications folder with the other signed apps.
Why is that a better thing?
Basically, the random path that it will launch an app from now with Gatekeeper is only the first time you launch the app. Some of the bad, malicious apps that are out there for macOS will run the first time, do their bad stuff, and then basically disguise themselves as something innocent. They'll remove any of the evidence of the malicious stuff they did, and you don't know any difference then. So that's kind of an extra protection against that. By running the app the first time, it's basically running it kind of in its own little special disk image on the operating system where it can't touch anything else. If it's trying to do stuff like disguise itself as a different app or make any changes that first time, it won't actually happen. So it can't access any of those other resources the first time it runs, and basically is an extra layer of protection against that specific type of threat. And it basically strips the bad apps of their disguise that they might try and put on after that initial launch. So it's a good security update to Gatekeeper itself.
So even if you've decided, I'm going Wild West, I mean, there's still a sheriff standing around going, okay, but we're going to try to make sure this is as safe for them as it can be anyway. Even if it's not, okay, this is just recorded from or downloaded from the App Store, or this is just somebody we trust. Even if you say, no, I'm doing the thing, then still Apple's going to be like, okay, let's make sure he doesn't kill himself doing the thing.
They still want to protect users from themselves, and that's not a bad thing. With some of these bad apps that are out there, do a pretty good job of tricking users into thinking they're legitimate. So it's just, okay, yes, the users, sure, they want to run that unsigned app, but Apple wants to double check anyway as much as they can.
Next item on the list, patches. Not for the eye, and not that 70s song that I now have stuck in my head. And anybody who remembers that song, now you have it stuck in your head too. Are we talking about patches from Apple here? Are we talking about patches from third-party apps? Are we talking about all of the above? What are we hitting?
Technically, we're talking about patches from Apple in this specific case.
Okay.
Basically, anytime Apple releases a new major update to the operating system, they will wrap a bunch of various bug fixes and closing loopholes that exploits were using. They'll basically kind of bundle all of that in as part and parcel along with the new features they're adding. It's important. They will release those security updates throughout the year, but when they do a brand new update, it's a good time to just get a bunch out of the way at once. So in this particular instance, besides all of the new features that Sierra is bringing to the table, there are a ton of security patches that are coming along. I believe the count is around 65 different things that were patched. And those things, they're not quite as exciting to most users as being able to use Siri on your Mac or unlocking your Mac with your watch. Mm-hmm. But they're very, very important. A lot of those exploits or vulnerabilities that were patched were issues that could allow attackers to run arbitrary executables, which basically means the bad guys can run whatever they want on your system, gain full access. And these are all the... When you think about computer security, a number of years ago, there was drive-by downloads. They're still a pretty big thing, especially on the Windows side of things. And a lot of these types of exploits that were patched could have allowed a drive-by download to take place. You go to a website in Safari and something basically exploits a vulnerability in the operating system, and you've got malware in your system. So Apple was taking a very proactive stance there and basically fixing as much as they could with this new release. So even if you're not super excited about the new features, the user features from Sierra, the security side of things alone is important enough to be a good reason to update to the latest version.
Those are 65 different reasons to update right there, because you're closing those different vulnerabilities.
And it's worth noting, too, I mean, for people that are listening who maybe don't have Sierra, but you're listening anyway, first of all, thanks. But on top of that, generally speaking, and I actually don't remember whether they did this or not for El Capitan, but when they come out with a new operating system, for people who have a machine that's too old to handle that operating system, or for people who, for whatever reason, decide they're not going to the next operating system, they invariably put out a patch for, at the very least, the last operating system as well. I mean, fixing what they're able to fix on the security side for people who are staying with the previous operating system, or maybe even the previous 2 operating systems, even if they're not going forward with the newest.
Yeah, they generally will patch the most recent 2 operating system releases prior to the brand new one. There have been a couple instances in the past. I believe there was an instance with either El Capitan or Yosemite. One or the other had one where it wasn't, the previous system wasn't being patched, at least not initially. There was kind of a bit of an uproar about that because of the fact that some hardware couldn't be upgraded and some users weren't quite ready to upgrade. But they're generally pretty good about making sure that they're not leaving the rest of the users too much in the lurch there.
Yeah, Apple's taking all that trouble. The least you could do is download the patches that they stayed up all night making for you. Next on the checklist, HTML5. HTML5 is kind of an interesting one because I don't think about this as an Apple, but it's not an Apple specific thing exactly, but I mean, certainly Apple has thrown its weight behind HTML5. Talk to me about why this turns up as one of your security features.
And we talk about security patches and keeping software updated. If you actually use Flash on your computer, that's one of the most common security alerts that you see is a new version's available, or we've stopped this version from running because it's vulnerable to these security issues. Make sure you're running the latest.
I can't remember which site it was, but actually, as we record this, just yesterday, I wrote something for macOS Can that was, I can't remember which site it is, but they basically said, look, we've run out of ways to write headlines for this story because it happens so often now. Yes, there's another exploit for Adobe Flash Player. Go download the new version and stop using the old version.
So yeah, Apple has put a lot of weight behind HTML5, and some of the features and functionality of it is that you could embed video. Traditionally, if you wanted video to play, you had to download some third-party plugin in the old days, or Flash. I mean, Flash is still a plugin, but it's just much more common nowadays. So HTML5 allows the webmasters to embed the videos into their pages without needing Flash. Mm-hmm. That's a huge thing there. If you're not needing to load Flash and you could still play the videos, then you're closing a big security hole.
The whole Flash thing, I mean, it's not quite a drive-by like you were talking about earlier, because at least on the Mac now, you really kind of have to try to get Flash on your Mac. I'm confused, though. How is it that we do end up with all these critical vulnerabilities? Like, I mean, seriously, once or twice a month, it seems at this point. It might not be quite that much, but it feels like it's that much. And to be clear, these critical vulnerabilities are, I mean, they're across the board. The one that I was talking about a moment ago, there's a critical vulnerability in not the most recent version, or at least it hasn't been found yet in the most recent version. But in the one that they just replaced, there was a critical vulnerability that could let ne'er-do-wells take over a Chromebook, a Windows machine, and a Mac. And I think there was a fourth operating system as well. I don't think it's Linux, but anyway, I mean, it can let them take over a machine and arbitrarily execute code. What is it about Flash that makes that? I mean, what is it that makes it so insecure in a way?
Well, there's a few things at play there. The first is that Flash is pretty ubiquitous on all sorts of platforms, from Android phones to Macs, PCs. It basically, since it was the de facto standard for playing rich media content on websites for the longest time, you have a humongous user base, which obviously appeals to the bad guys who are trying to exploit the largest number of users possible with the minimal amount of effort.
Right.
The second is that because you have such a large user base using such varied amount of hardware types and platforms and all that, Adobe has a humongous code base as far as Flash is concerned. They've got to cover making sure compatibility works with a bunch of different types of machines, hardware, operating system versions. And as such, it's probably become very, very unwieldy code base. And keeping track of reasons why they changed code in the past or accidentally introducing security flaws when they're trying to fix a completely unrelated bug. It's just that it's such an old, large code base that it's just become very difficult for them to stay on top of it. And it's not just the security side of things. There's performance considerations. It really will, if you have a laptop, it'll totally drain your battery power quickly. It's the reason Steve Jobs was against it on the iPhone, was mainly a performance reason. There's also a security aspect. But basically, it's just that it's so popular. It's almost like why there's more Windows malware than there is Mac malware overall, is that Windows has a humongous install base for users. Flash, again, humongous install base, makes it a prime target for the bad guys. So it's a combination of Adobe probably having their hands full in terms of keeping on top of their code, and then the bad guys are actively targeting it because they know it's a pretty good thing to target as far as doing bad stuff goes.
And even if you think that you're not like, oh, I only go to trusted Flash sites where I play my solitaire game or whatever it is, so many sites are using Flash to serve ads. So it's being triggered, even if you don't really think it's being triggered, just your day-to-day use of surfing the web. If you have Flash on your computer, it's being triggered all along the way.
That's actually one of the routes that the bad guys use, too, is they're not necessarily hacking your favorite web page when they're exploiting a Flash vulnerability. They're getting malicious ads injected into a advertiser network. So it's whoever this website's using to show ads on their website, that place either gets tricked into distributing a malicious ad or hacked or whatever. And that's where the majority of those actual security exploits are coming from. They're not necessarily the website itself as a problem. It's more the ads that are on that website as the portal to this problem overall.
Last item on the checklist for today, there is a new file system in macOS Sierra. You're going way under the hood, it seems to me, at this point. I mean, as long as the file system works, as long as I can find the things I need to find, it's not something that I really spend a lot of time thinking about. But you're telling me there's a new security angle to the file system in the new operating system.
Well, technically, the new file system hasn't been rolled out for the majority of users yet. Apple included the technology and the capabilities for people who want to go ahead and test this new Apple file system, APFS. They have said that they're going to be releasing it to the general public in 2017. And we don't have any exact dates on when that will be, so we're assuming by the end of 2017. Most likely it will be integrated with the next release of macOS, either next fall or slightly later in 2017. It basically is going to be a modern file system. A lot of the file systems that kind of are underneath everything, or underneath the Finder, what's happening in the background, are pretty ancient in terms of how long they've been around for. So there have been limitations or potential security issues or things that are bottlenecks in terms of speed for copying files or saving files, overwriting files. So Apple basically wanted to create something that was modern and that would work across all of their hardware platforms, all their operating systems going forward. So iOS, macOS, tvOS, watchOS. We don't have a ton of details on it yet. There's some developer documentation and some information on things that won't work anymore. That's more of a concern for developers who are preparing their apps to work with this new file system once it comes out. But we do know some of the security benefits that are going to be coming with it. And I guess the biggest one would be integrated encryption. It's going to be, right now we have File Vault on Macs, which will basically encrypt all your files. When you're not using your computer, all of them are encrypted, can't be accessed. Very good for security. We've discussed it here before. The new way it'll work is it's going to be faster encryption, stronger encryption, and way more efficient. Right now, if you turn on File Vault and you hadn't had it on before, it takes a while to make sure everything's encrypted, and you kind of say, oh, I wish I had done that from the start. And the new file system has that integrated automatically, so you don't have to make any changes. It'll all be automatic and efficient. And the other benefits there will be when you're cloning a drive, if you're making a backup or transferring files to another computer, it'll be faster, more accurate. There's always a slight chance of a time machine backup going corrupt, and it'll help limit that. And it'll have more efficient allocation of space, so your files don't take up so much space in the drive. Basically, all these really cool features that most users won't actually realize are there, but from a developer point of view or from a security point of view, it's really good stuff. So just trust us when we say this will be a good file system. It's a welcome improvement. Again, we don't know exactly when it's going to be released publicly as part of the operating system itself, but Apple is going to be providing more information as this year goes by and into 2017, when we will find out exactly when this will be officially implemented. But the underlying technology is in place now, and developers can test it out, and so we'll see where it goes from here. But it's something very exciting that's going to be coming in the future.
It sounds like something that people are going to either watch while doing something else or fast forward through at the WWDC 2017 keynote. For the average user at home, right? Developers are going to be stoked. And the cool thing is, the cool thing is that they're looking that closely at security even. It's not just a 5 minutes ago thing, but it's also down the road as well. If there is anything that you missed, if there is anything that you'd like to go back and read more about, if you would just like to be able to see what we're talking about as well as hear what we're talking about, there is a website associated with this show, and that website is securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question or a comment that you would like to send our way, we'd love to hear from you. We have an email address. It is checklist@securemac.com. And if you have trouble remembering that, as people sometimes do, just don't forget, you're listening to The Checklist by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.